Pillion, which is the debut feature from writer-director Harry Lighton, adapted from a novel by Adam Mars-Jones. Weirdly enough, I was in a screening this week, and Adam Mars-Jones, who I used to know from Newsnight Review, Critic Days, who's the novelist upon whose novel Pillion is based. I said, Adam, can I just ask you, how close is Pillion to your book? And he said, if they changed the character names, I wouldn't have recognized it as the book. And he said, and incidentally, I say that as a compliment. So I haven't read Box Hill, but I know that Pillion is sort of very different from it. And when you interviewed Alexander Skarsgård last week, he said that the book is a lot crueler. Is a lot,
yes, which I thought was very interesting, because I thought the movie's edging that way anyway.
Well, the movie was described by Mr. Skarsgård as a dom-com, as in a sub and dom-com. This is a genre type that will sit along. Do you remember when Bill Nighy first described Shaun of the Dead as a rom-zom-com?
I do remember that now, yes.
So the poster quotes for Pillion say, sexy, hilarious, brilliant, to which I think you would also add, and squirm-inducingly awkward.
Excruciating.
So at times, it's like a kind of bizarre mashup of William Friedkin's Cruising, which is set in the leather bars of New York, and Carry On Camping. We've got this kind of, on the one hand, this sort of explicit leather-clad sex, and on the other hand, these strangely quaint British locales. So Skarsgård is Ray, who is this ultra-butch biker who catches the eye of Colin, played by Harry Melling, who's a Harry Potter alumni, who's had a really, really impressive post-Hogwarts career. We saw him quite recently in Harvest. And Ray is a long-term dominant partner in sub-dom relationships. And he sees in Colin, I think he calls it a talent for adoration. And Colin, who previously has had no experience of the BDSM lifestyle, sort of takes to this new role like a fish to water, but like a new fish to water. When Ray asks him, and he said this in the interview, what am I going to do with you? He says, anything you like, which means, okay, we're consenting on this in this relationship. And so they begin this odd couple relationship. Ray, who is this impenetrable, enigmatic pin-up with a cruel streak who takes great pleasure in humiliating his new playmate, whilst apparently also repressing feelings, emotions that he has. And then Colin, who is this retiring, floppy-haired mummy's boy, who is still trying to sort of maintain a balance between, on the one hand, this new thing that he's discovered, which is that he's a sub, and on the other hand, a sense of normalcy with his nice suburban parents. Here is a clip.
I was wondering if maybe you might want to come have dinner with my parents sometime.
Dinner with your parents?
Yeah.
And you'd like that?
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, they would.
I wouldn't. I don't think that's a very good idea.
Okay.
No.
Sorry.
Yeah. And when he says it's not a very good idea, I think he's right.
But also that moment when he starts humming along, no, which is a nice little detail about the way that the relationship is set up. So look, there have been loads of films about BDSM, many of which I have introduced on Film 4 Extreme channel. So, you know, there's Barbette Schroeder's Maitresse, there's Frank Riplow's Taxis on Clo, Kirby Dick's Sick, The Life and Death of Bob Flanagan's Super Masochist, Nick Broomfield's Fetishes. And then most recently, we had this really great Finnish sort of existential black comedy, Dogs Don't Wear Pants, which I really, really liked. And the best of those films understand two things about BDSM relationships. The first one is that they are fiercely consensual, and I mean often more so than apparently in inverted commas normal relationships, because it's decided, you know, this is what we do, this is what we don't do, this is what the roles are. The second thing is that the power in a sort of sub and dom relationship often doesn't lie with the dominant partner. The power actually resides with the sub, who is sort of authoring the scene. And the best movies about it understand that. What makes Pillion slightly different is that the roles haven't yet been clearly drawn, at least not for Colin, who is in the process of discovering them, meaning that he's not entirely sure whether he wants to be doing this, in the same way that the audience is sort of slightly confused. So this is made explicit by the fact, and you and I talked about this after we saw the film, because we talked about it after I think we had different responses to it, but there is a moment in which Colin says to Ray, I want days off. I want days in which we just behave normally. I want to be able to sleep in the bed, not on the floor. And the other normal thing is they want them to go on a date, and he wants them to kiss. And the scene that you referred to in the interview, if you haven't heard the interview that Simon did with Alexander Skarsgård, go and listen to it, because it's a really good interview, and he's very, very eloquent about this. When he goes to the dinner, and they do go to see the mum and dad, and the mum basically says to Ray, and she uses a very strong word, but the word is, you're horrible. What are you doing with my son?
Yeah.
And the thing that makes that scene so kind of uncomfortable is that because of the way the thing is set up, we're not yet sure whether this is what Colin wants. Or, I mean, yes, okay, he's adopted the clothes, and he's adopted the neck chain, and he's adopted the sub position, which he's obviously getting pleasure out of. But he also seems to want, something else. So there is this whole thing going on that they have this consensual relationship, but one part of that consensual relationship still seems to be figuring out whether or not that is actually what they want. And I think this is what makes the film, for all it's, the thing about hilarious and sexy and all that stuff, which it says on the poster, I also think it's deeply uncomfortable. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's deeply uncomfortable because the uncertainty is there's this whole area of discovery which hasn't yet sort of become fully fledged consent. I mean, in terms of the sort of, there's obviously a lot of kind of comedic juxtaposition. All those things like that title, Last Tango in Halifax, and there was a documentary called Boogie Nights in Bromley. This idea about, sort of exotic sex, but with British locations. There is a sort of thing of that going on all the way through this, which I think is one of the things that people are finding sort of, most comedic, that kind of collision of those two worlds. I have to say the film is refreshingly unabashed in its treatment of the mechanics of sex. I mean, the BBFC thing, it's 18 for strong sex and nudity. And I think you said after you'd seen it that you thought it was one of the most explicit films that you'd seen. Is that right?
Certainly for this program, yes. Refreshingly, yeah. It's unabashed. I'm not sure about the refreshingly, really. I could have done with less freshness.
But I wonder whether, if you compare that to the way in which heterosexual sex is depicted on screen, I wonder whether is it any more explicit than?
No, it's because it was. I mean, I said to Mr. Skarsgård, how close does this get to an abusive relationship?
Yes.
Because I thought it was an abusive relationship.
Which is kind of what I was sort of trying to talk about before.
And so I think when you see an abusive relationship, which is what the mother is kind of clearly experiencing, and the fact that she's dying, obviously she's got absolutely no reservations about she's got to have to come out and say this straight away. When she says, "You're a C word," I'm thinking, yeah, you're right, because on the evidence available to the parents, he is abusing his relationship with their son. So I'm not sure it's the mechanics. It's just the fact that it is an abusive relationship, which is never comfortable to watch.
Although during the course of it, Colin does come to discover that he is a sub. That is what he is, and that is what he wants. But that happens during the course of the movie. And I think, as I said, that's kind of why with any of these things, that's where the danger zone is. And that's what I think makes it interesting. It was funny. I mean, when I was watching it, I was reminded, did you ever see 9.5 Weeks with Mickey Rourke and Kim Basinger?
Yeah, a long time ago, I think. Okay.
So it's not a very good film. It's a very kind of Hollywood glossy, blandification of a potentially interesting source. But there's a exchange in that in which Kim Basinger says to Mickey Rourke, "How did you know I would respond to you the way I did?" And Mickey Rourke says, "Because when I looked at you, I saw me." And the film isn't any good. But that one line kind of sticks out as, okay, it's like one of the very few insightful moments that the whole sub-dom thing, it's an agreement, and it's two sides of the same coin, and it's two people in a consensual, agreed situation. I think there is an echo of that here. The thing here is that as in the case with 9.5 Weeks, one of them knows it and the other one is still discovering it. I mean, in the end, how you feel about the film will kind of depend on how you feel about that tension. And I can imagine people at 1 minute laughing and finding it sort of absurdist, and then another minute recoiling and being sort of and being shocked. I mean, you said afterwards, I never did like picnics.
No.
But
especially remind me if I'm ever offered to go on a picnic in a kind of a dumb sob kind of sub-dom kind of no, I don't think so. That doesn't look like. I mean, the thing about picnics is there's too much Tupperware anyway, and I would rather just have a sandwich at home. But anyway.
I was in a screening, not the same screening that Adam Miles Jones was at, another screening, and a couple of critics were talking about it. A friend of mine, Linda, who's a very, very good critic, and so I thought it was really sweet. Just thought it was really sweet and really, so what I think is, in many ways, it is what you bring to it. And, and how uncomfortable it makes you feel is kind of dependent on that. But I also think that one of its strengths is that it does make you feel uncomfortable, is that it does raise exactly the kind of question that we're having, the discussion that we're having.
And if you're watching it on your laptop in the kitchen, which is what I just thought, I can't, if someone walks in now, I can't be watching this because there's no amount of explanation. It's for work. Though it's going to get me out of this.
They should put that on the poster. Hilarious, sexy, brilliant. Don't watch it on your laptop in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So
I mean, but you're right. I mean, it is laugh out loud when this Viking god turns up, and the initial reaction with the parents, that they say, it sounds as though you're not from around here. And he says, Chislehurst. That's funny. I wanted more of that, to be perfectly honest.